Hello, everybody. Welcome to class today. We have quite a bit of material to study from Revelation chapter 17 still. So let me just share what our plan is for today. I am hoping that we will be able to finish this chapter that we're on now, the one in Revelation 17. And then we're going to take a look at the last chapter. It's a short chapter because it's very closely related to what we've been studying. And then tomorrow morning, of course, we're going to study the chapter from Great Controversy, God's Law Immutable. And then in the afternoon, we're going to take a look at the chapter on Daniel 11, verse 40 through chapter 12 and verse 2. The other chapter that we were going to cover, we're not going to be able to cover in class, but it's very well explained in the study notes, so you can review that yourself. So it'll take 2 sessions to do what Ellen White had to say about Daniel 11. Some people think she didn't have much to say, but she did have a lot to say about the last verses of Daniel 11 and the first 2 or 3 verses of Daniel chapter 12. So that's our plan, and we are going to begin in your study notes on page 202 today, the subtitle, The Perspective of Revelation 12. But we'll read the paragraph immediately before. Let's have a word of prayer. Father in heaven, thank you for giving us life this day. So many gifts that you give us. The air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink, and the blessing of having your word. Things that we take for granted, that in many places are forbidden to study the scriptures. We ask, Lord, that you will bless us in our study in this session and in the remaining sessions today and tomorrow. We plead for your Spirit. We plead for power to not only understand, but also to proclaim this wonderful message that you have given to your remnant church. We thank you, Father, for the privilege of prayer, and we know that you have heard this prayer because you know the end from the beginning. We ask it in the precious and holy name of Jesus. Amen. So let's begin in the paragraph right before the subtitle, The Perspective of Revelation 12. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look, at least in the next several minutes, we're going to take a look at the ebb and flow of waters. Some of this we've already mentioned before, but now we're going to put it all together. The ebb and flow, in other words, the flow and drying up of waters in Revelation 12, in Revelation 13, in Revelation 17, and then we're going to do it in Daniel chapter 11 and verses 44 to verse 44 all the way to the end of the chapter. So let's begin with the paragraph right before the perspective of Revelation 12. A detailed study of Revelation 12, 13, 16, and 17. We have to connect 16 and 17, right? Because chapter 16 speaks of the drying up of the Euphrates, and chapter 17 speaks of a harlot sitting on the river Euphrates, and the river Euphrates drying up at the end. So we have to connect the 6th plague, we've studied this, of Revelation 16 with Revelation 17, where the harlot, whose name is Babylon, is seated on many waters, which is the river Euphrates, because that's the river of ancient Babylon. So a detailed study of Revelation 12 and 13 and 16 and 17 also reveals in different ways that the bloodthirsty waters will flow again from the dragon's mouth. Revelation 12:17 says that, Revelation 13 verse 11, and Revelation 17, 1 and 2. But these waters that are going to, a persecution that are going to flow again, will dry up for the final time when the waters of the symbolic Euphrates, upon which the harlot sits, cease to flow at the outpouring of the 6th plague. At that time, the political rulers of the world and their subjects, the waters, will forsake the harlot and her daughters and turn against them once and for all. So let's look at the ebb and flow of waters in Revelation chapter 12. Revelation 12, verse 15. And this is just basically review, but now I want us to bring all of these chapters together. Revelation 12:15 describes a seven-headed, 10-horned beast. And there's no doubt that this scarlet dragon is spewing water out of how many mouths? He's spewing waters out of one mouth. And there's 7 mouths because this dragon beast has 7 heads. So the purpose of spewing out the waters in Revelation chapter 12 and verse 15 is to what? To drown the woman. In other words, that's persecution against the woman. And what does the woman represent? The woman represents the church. However, in the very next verse, verse 16, we're told that when the persecuting waters were at flood stage, the earth helped the woman, and what happened? And the waters were swallowed up. In other words, the waters are dried up, right? Now, notice verse 15 through 16, where this that I just described is found. So the serpent spewed water out of his mouth, singular, 1. We've already talked about this being the 5th head, like a flood. Remember that word, flood. After the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. Once again, only one mouth. One wonders what happened after the waters were dried up. By the way, they were dried up at the end of the times and dividing of time, right? So one wonders, did the waters flow again? Well, the answer is in the very next verse. The very next verse, verse 17 of chapter 12, explains that as a result of the drying up of the waters in verse 16, the dragon becomes enraged again. And he launches a persecution against the remnant of the woman's seed. In other words, the last part of the woman's seed, those who live at the very end of human history. And so he's going to manifest his rage again. So verse 15 describes the flowing of the waters to drown the woman. Verse 16 describes the drying up of the waters, and verse 17 describes the rage of the dragon, where there's going to be a second period of persecution because he's angry that the waters were dried up. This brought about a second stage of persecution, and there's no time period attached to the second period, right? There's no time. It doesn't say times the dividing of time, 42 months or anything. It simply says that the dragon is enraged with the woman, goes to make war with the remnant of her seed, but it doesn't say how long. And we've already explained the reason for that. Now, are the bloodthirsty waters going to flow again? Can we be sure? Yeah, verse 17 says that they will. Notice, let's read verse 17. And it's the same 7-headed dragon that ruled for times the dividing of time. It's the same chapter. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the remnant of her seed. That's a better translation, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now, we covered the next section, but I'm going to cover it again because it's important to understand that the waters that the dragon spewed out of his mouth in verse 15 is the river Euphrates. Okay? That's crucially important. The 7-headed, 10-horned dragon of Revelation chapter 12 spews water out of his mouth, and that dragon symbolizes what? The papacy, right? So is the papacy Babylon? Yes. The papacy is Babylon. Is this beast in Revelation 12 the same beast as the beast upon which the harlot rides? Yes. Is the harlot the Roman Catholic papacy as well? Yes. Okay, so must the river in Revelation 12 be the same river that she's sitting on in Revelation 17? Of course. So the waters in Revelation 12 that the dragon spews out of his mouth is the river Euphrates, the river of Babylon. And so let's review this material because this is crucially important. Although the water of the river in Revelation 12:15 is unnamed, we can safely conclude that it was the great river Euphrates. If the dragon of Revelation 12:13 and 16 and the harlot of Revelation 17 represent the papacy, as Ellen White makes absolutely clear, then the river or the waters must be the same in both chapters. The King James Version of Joshua 24, 2, 3, 14, and 15 describes the Euphrates River euphemistically as the flood. So the Euphrates is called what? It's called the flood in Joshua. Other Bible versions refer to it as the river with the definite article, while yet other versions, such as the New Century Version, the English Standard Version, the Contemporary English Version, and the New Living Translation, replace the word flood or river with Euphrates. So did the translators of these versions understand that the river is the river Euphrates? Of course they did. Genesis 15 verse 18 describes the Euphrates as the great river. Does the book of Revelation pick up on that? It says that the sixth plague is poured out on the great river Euphrates, and the Euphrates dries up. So Genesis 15:18 describes the Euphrates as the great river. It is hardly a coincidence that the great harlot sits on the great river Euphrates in Great Babylon, and that the waters will eventually dry up on her and lead to her fall. Revelation 16:12. In short, the flood, with the definite article, the flood, in verse 16, of Revelation 12:15 and 16, which the dragon spewed out of his mouth during the times, and half a time, is the symbolic river Euphrates. So must we connect Revelation 12 with Revelation 17, you think? Of course. This is the key to understanding Revelation 12, 13, and 17, is to understand the ebb and flow of the waters. Now, the word translated flood in the King James Version of Revelation 12, 15, and 16 is the word potamos. The self-same word that appears in the parable of the wise and foolish contractors who built their house on the rock and on the sand. Most uses of the word potamos in the New Testament simply refer to a river, not to a flood. However, in the parable, it becomes very clear that this is not an ordinary river. This is a river at flood stage, because the floods come, and the house that is on the rock stands, and the one that is on the sand falls. Are you with me or not? So even though the word potamos generally in the New Testament refers to a river, in the parable it refers to a river at flood stage. So the river in Revelation chapter 12 is not just a nice little peaceful river. It is a river at flood stage because it wants to drown the woman. For that, the river has to be a flood. By the way, this is proved true. In the parallel passage of Luke, where you find the same parable of the man who built his house on the rock and on the sand, in the same parable, but in Luke 6, 48 and 49, the word for flood is plemuda. And there's no doubt in the Greek that plemuda means a flood. And this is how it reads in the Gospel of Luke. And when the flood arose, the stream, the potamos. So, in other words, this is a flooded river. Are you understanding this? So When the flood, that definitely refers to a river that's going out of its banks, arose, the stream, the potamos, beat vehemently against that house and could not shake it, for it was founded on the rock. So is the ebb and flow of waters clear in Revelation chapter 12? Yes? Now let's go to Revelation 13 and see if we can understand the ebb and flow of waters in Revelation 13. By the way, waters are not mentioned. There's a different symbolism, but it means the same thing. Revelation 13, 1 through 10, expands upon the prophecy of Revelation 12, verse 6, and verses 13 through 17, by referring to the persecuted woman as the saints. In other words, in Revelation 13, the woman is the saints. It's called the saints. And the dragon is referred to as a beast that rises from the sea. Okay? So the woman of Revelation 12 is the saints in Revelation 13. And the dragon of Revelation chapter 12 becomes the sea beast in Revelation 13. And by the way, we already read that the sea beast got its throne, its authority, and እቲ power from the dragon beast. So it's a continuation of the dragon beast, in other words. So, Revelation 13, 1 through 10, expands upon the prophecy of Revelation 12, verse 6, verses 13 to 17, by referring to the persecuted woman as the saints and to the dragon as a sea beast who received its marching orders from the dragon of Revelation 12. Revelation 13, verse 7, explains that after the sea beast received its marching orders from the seven-headed and ten-horned dragon of Revelation 12, what did this sea beast do? It persecuted the saints for 42 months. Is this the same period of Revelation 12, times, and the dividing of time, that the dragon persecuted the woman? Of course, we know that the prophecies are connected. This is the identical period during which the dragon spewed waters out of its mouth to drown the woman in Revelation 12. And it's also the same time that the little horn persecuted the saints of the Most High in Daniel 7. So are Daniel 7, Revelation 12, and Revelation 13 connected? Yeah. Absolutely. You can't study one without looking at the others. We can therefore be certain that the dragon who persecuted the woman in Revelation 12 and the sea beast that received its power, throne, and authority from the dragon in chapter 13 represent the same power, and the persecuting waters of Revelation 12 are equivalent to the persecution of the saints in chapter 13. So far, so good? Now, Revelation 13, verse 3, verse 9, and verse 10 explains that after persecuting the saints for 42 months, what did the sea beast receive? A deadly wound. Did persecution cease? Yes. So the deadly wound is parallel to what? To the drying up of the waters. How many heads have a deadly wound in Revelation 13? One. How many heads were spewing out water in Revelation 12? One. Is that the same head? Yes. So the waters being dried up in Revelation 12 is the same as the deadly wound in Revelation 13, which stops persecution. So do the waters, so to speak, cease to flow in Revelation 13? Absolutely. So Revelation 13, 3, 9, and 10 explains that after persecuting the saints for 42 months, the sea beast received a deadly wound on only one of its heads. Undoubtedly the same head that had spewed out waters in Revelation 12 and verse 15. Thus, the deadly wound suspended the sea beast's persecution of the saints for a season in chapter 13, in the same way that the earth had suspended the dragon's persecution of the woman in Revelation 12. Is that clear? It's not rocket science, folks. When we connect these chapters, each one expanding upon the next, because Revelation 13 tells us, the drying up of the waters is parallel to the deadly wound. We cannot overemphasize that only one of the seven heads of the sea beast received a deadly wound at the conclusion of the 42 months. Likewise, only one head ceased to spew out waters out of its mouth, singular, in chapter 12. Clearly, when the wound heals, not all the heads will heal, but only the one that was wounded heals. We're told in Revelation 13 that the sword gave the papacy its deadly wound. The question is, what is the sword that wounded the beast? According to Romans 13, verse 4, the sword is in the hand of the civil authorities, and they use this figurative sword to impose fines, to confiscate property, to incarcerate, and in some cases and places to execute the death penalty. That's how the civil power uses the sword. The papacy was wounded by the sword in the sense that the punitive power of the state was removed from her hand and turned against her, correct? In the French Revolution. Now, the prophecy of Revelation 13 explains. Notice this. Is the water going to flow again according to Revelation 13? Yes. Oh, absolutely. Now, I know that water isn't used in Revelation 13, but it's the same thing as the healing of the wound. The flowing of the waters, again, is the same as what? The healing of the deadly wound. Let's continue. The prophecy of Revelation 13 explains that after a period of convalescence, which we are living in now, by the way, the deadly wound of the sea beast will be healed. So to speak, the waters of the symbolic Euphrates will what? Will flow again from the dragon's mouth when the civil rulers and their subjects restore the sword to the beast. So the sword wounds the beast, persecution ceases, but then the civil powers return the sword to the beast, and now the waters flow again, parallel to Revelation 12. It's simple, isn't it? Now, expressed in the terms of Revelation 17, the civil rulers with their citizens will lend their support to the harlot once more, and the waters of persecution will flow again. Ellen White wrote in Great Controversy 564, "Let the restraints now imposed by secular governments be removed, and Rome be reinstated in her former power, and there would speedily be a revival of her tyranny and persecution." So the drying of the waters is because the state turned against the church. The flowing of the waters again means that the state will once more favor the church. It's that simple. Putting symbols together then, the head of the dragon, listen carefully, the head of the dragon is the papal civil kingdom. Okay? Because the harlot is the church part. So the head of the dragon is the papal civil kingdom. The harlot symbolizes the apostate religious side of the papacy. How was this symbolized in Daniel 2? What was the civil part in Daniel 2? The iron fist of Rome. And what was the state, the church part? The clay. So they're distinguished, right? They're distinguishable. And so, putting the symbols together, the head of the dragon is the papal civil kingdom. The harlot symbolizes the apostate religious side of the papacy. The body of the dragon, we covered this yesterday, are the multitudes that support her and follow what the kings say. And the 10 horns on the head are the kings of the earth and the whole world who are allied with the harlot's kingdom. The 10 horns. Some have wondered whether the beast was actually killed or only mortally wounded. The expression, "as it were wounded to death," in Revelation 13:3, is identical to the description of Jesus as the lamb as it had been slain. Was Jesus really slain? Was he? Was Jesus really slain? Of course he was. It's the same expression for the beast. no one would sustain that Jesus was not killed. The fact is that Revelation 13 verse 10 says, he who kills with the sword will be killed with the sword. Now let's go to the final drying up. This is Revelation chapter 17 now. We notice Revelation 12, Revelation 13. Now we're going to take a look at Revelation 17. Is Revelation 17 parallel? Does it have to do with waters and drying up of waters and so on? You better believe it does. Notice what it says. According to Revelation 17, when the sea beast's deadly wound is healed, the Babylonian harlot will once again influence the political rulers, because she's going to fornicate with them, right? According to verses 1 and 2. So she will influence the political leaders, and through them, the persecuting waters, their citizens in other words, of the symbolic Euphrates, to flood or persecute God's people. That's the Euphrates upon which she is sitting. This period, when the spiritual Euphrates will be at flood stage, is described in Revelation 17, 1 and 2. Chapter 17 will provide the fullest explanation of Revelation 12, 17. Is Revelation 12, 17 speaking about the second stage of persecution after the earth helps the woman by swallowing up the waters? Revelation 12, 17. But it gives you only an inkling that there's going to be a period of persecution, and what the reasons for the persecution are. The earth helped the woman, that enrages the dragon. He's also enraged because the remnant of the woman's seed keep the commands of God and have the testimony of Jesus. But it doesn't tell you very much about how it's going to persecute. It doesn't tell you about the waters. It doesn't tell you about the harlot, about the restoring of the sword to the papacy. It doesn't say anything about that. It simply says there's going to be a second period of persecution. And where is that amplified and expanded? Revelation 17. The expansion principle. Now, let's continue here. It will describe the time, Revelation 17, when Babylon's symbolic Euphrates will flow once more because the rulers of the world and their citizens have restored the sword to the harlot and delivered her from her captivity. The scenario in Revelation 17 will be similar to the one in Revelation 12 and 13, albeit with different symbols. After the earth helped the woman by drying up the persecuting waters, and the sea beast was wounded in Revelation 13, the dragon will be filled with rage against the last remnant of the woman's seed, and will launch a deadly flood of persecution against them. However, when it appears that the faithful will be wiped off the face of the earth, God will dry up the persecuting waters and deliver his people. That's the drying up of the river Euphrates. Does it make sense? Do you have to give a different interpretation to Revelation 17 like many people do to understand that chapter? Do you have to insert Assyria and Egypt in the equation? No, you don't have to insert Egypt and Assyria to end up with 8. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Revelation 17 follows the same theme as Revelation 12 and Revelation 13. By the way, let me ask you, in all of these prophecies, where is Turkey? Where is Turkey in these prophecies? Nowhere. There's no place to insert Turkey in these chain prophecies. And yet many Adventists are embracing the idea that Turkey has a very literal Turkey. Istanbul today is the capital. They're saying that Turkey is going to play a huge role in end-time prophecy. Islam. Let me ask you, how many times does Ellen White mention Islam playing any role in end-time prophecy? I'll demonstrate it to you. 0. It's a distraction. It's a distraction so you don't see what the true fulfillment of prophecy is. Don't be hoodwinked. That's another way of saying don't be deceived. Okay, let's continue here. Revelation 16:12 describes the moment when God will dry up the raging waters of the symbolic Euphrates, once more as he did at the end of the 1260 years. The seventh and final head, what is the seventh and final head? The papacy, healed. What is the sixth head? Oh, the kingdom of the United States that helps the seventh head get its power back. So the seventh and final head will receive a definitive and final death blow. Thus, Revelation 17 expands upon the final flowing of the river and its drying up. Revelation 17 describes how the bloodthirsty river will dry up. We have seen that when the rulers and their subjects give their support, this is an important paragraph. We have seen that when the rulers and their subjects give their support to the harlot, the river flows. True or false? Yes. Of course. The river flows. And what results? Persecution. However, when they withdraw their support, the persecuting river what? Dries up. So Revelation 17 expresses it differently. It says that the kings, and by the way, their subjects, who supported their harlot are going to turn against her. Yes. So the drying up of the waters in chapter 16 is explained as the kings of the earth turning against the harlot. Are you following me? It all fits together perfectly. And we need to let the world see this. It's too intricate and too harmonious to say that this was not inspired by God. And as we look at what's happening in these days in the United States of America, you can see this in the process of development. Now, let's read Revelation 17, 13 to 18, and I have some explanatory notes in brackets. Remember, brackets are my inspiration, if you please. It's because I don't want to read the whole passage and then have to explain the whole passage at the same time. I need to explain piece by piece. Okay, these, the civil rulers, are of one mind. Are all the civil rulers of the world going to be on the same page at the end? Oh yeah. These are of one mind. It's talking about the 10 horns on the last head. The last head is the papacy, and the civil power of the papacy, and the 10 kings represent all the kings, all the rulers of the world that support the state of the papacy. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. In other words, they're going to give their power and authority to the multitudes that support them. These will make war with the Lamb. Now, not directly, by the way. Ellen White says that they will war against the Lamb in the person of his witnesses. In other words, they're going to war against the remnant of her seed. It's not directly against Christ. It's indirectly against Christ. This is 7 Testimonies, page 182. You know, there you have, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who was Saul persecuting? Who was he persecuting? Was he going to take a rocket to heaven and persecute Jesus? Of course not. He was persecuting the church. And the church is the body of Christ. So when you attack the body, you're attacking the head. When you attack the sheep, you're attacking the shepherd. When you're attacking the sovereign, you're attacking the subjects. When you attack the wife, you are attacking the husband. That's the picture here. The Battle of Armageddon is not simply that the wicked are shooting rockets at Jesus as he comes on the clouds of heaven. The war is against the remnant of her seed. So it says these will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome it. This is the good news. Let's be on the side of Jesus. He has the last word. and the Lamb will overcome him. And then it gives a reason. For he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. And notice, and those who are with him, that is the remnant of her seed, folks. And those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. I love that. They were called, and they responded to the call. They were chosen, but they're faithful. Faithful till the end. Then he said to me, now comes the explanation, the flowing waters we know. The flowing waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, by the way, were they of one mind before this? Oh yeah, they were on the same page, lending their civil power to this harlot. But what's going to happen? Is the support going to dry up, so to speak? Oh yes. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot and make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh and burn her with fire. This means that they're going to really be mad. For God, listen carefully, for God has put it into their hearts, the hearts of the 10 horns, on the 7th head, to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, on the same page as the river flows, by the way, and to give their kingdom to the beast. That's the multitudes. See, they tell their multitudes to persecute, to give their kingdom to the beast, because we identified the beast as the waters, right? We already dealt with that. Until the words of God are fulfilled. When will the words of God be fulfilled or be finished? At the 7th plague. Do you know a voice comes out of the temple at the moment of the 7th plague? And do you know what that voice says? It is finished. The persecution of my people is over. So they're going to be of one mind until when? Until God has the final word. It is done. Now, and the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Now, in chapter 18, it's going to go back and it's going to explain what's going to happen to the commercial world when Babylon falls apart. Because here it's dealt with the religious side, religious political side, and then in Revelation chapter 18, it's going to deal with how the commercial world, how the business world is going to react when the river dries. Now let's see what the little lady had to say. You think she understood this? Of course she did. Lucky guess. No. She understood this. But she doesn't use the language of Revelation, but she matter of fact explains what the language means. Let's read Great Controversy, pages 635 and 636. The title is God's People Delivered. When the protection of human laws shall be withdrawn from those who honor the law of God, there will be in different lands, is it going to be only in the United States? No. In different lands, a simultaneous movement for their destruction. Are the waters flowing here?
Very much.
Oh yeah. Where is it flowing? In Iraq. No. It's not talking about the literal Euphrates. There will be a simultaneous movement for their destruction. As the time appointed in the decree draws near, the decree, this is a death decree. The people, are those the waters? Are those the waters?
Yes.
Are they being instructed by the kings who are of one mind? Yes. The people will conspire to root out the hated sect. Are the waters flowing freely?
Yes.
Oh, yes. It will be determined to strike in one night a decisive blow which shall utterly silence the voice of dissent and reproof. Let me ask you, are God's people in jeopardy at this point?
Yes.
Oh, they're still in jeopardy. The kings are of one mind, and they're telling the beast, which is the multitudes, they're telling them, these people, you got to get rid of these people. Notice the next paragraph. The people of God. By the way, those are the ones who are called, chosen, and faithful, right? The people of God. Some in prison cells, some hidden in solitary retreats in the forests and the mountains, still plead for divine protection, while in every quarter, companies of armed men, urged on by hosts of evil angels, are preparing for the work of death. It is now, in the hour of utmost extremity, that the God of Israel will interpose for the deliverance of His chosen. Now it's going to go back and talk about the flowing of the waters with shouts of triumph, jeering, and imprecation. Throngs of evil men are about to rush. What is it that rushes? Water. Are about to rush. What's the name of the waters? Euphrates. Are about to rush upon their prey. When lo, a dense blackness. By the way, this is the fifth plague. It's the plague of darkness. A dense blackness, deeper than the darkness of the night, falls upon the earth. Read the fifth plague. It's darkness. It's the plague right before the drying up of the Euphrates. Do you think Ellen White would have anything to say about the drying up of the Euphrates after the darkness? Of course. When a dense blackness, deeper than the darkness of the night, falls upon the earth, then a rainbow shining with the glory of the throne of God spans the heavens and seems to encircle each praying company. The angry multitudes are suddenly arrested. What's that? Does persecution end here? What is it that rushes? Waters. So what does it mean here when it says they're suddenly arrested? The waters are what? Drying up. Persecution ceases. Why? Because the kings now are going to turn against her. That's the seventh plague. The next plague. Do you see the flow? Darkness. The waters are ready to rush. They're arrested. And then the kings turn on her. The little lady had it right. Do we need to distribute Great Controversy? Folks, we need to distribute that book. And we need to have a passion to save souls. We want people to be on the right side. Don't we want them to be on the right side? People say, Jesus came and died to save me. No, He came to save us. He came to save everyone. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in Him, whoever accepts it, should not perish, but have everlasting life. Now let's continue reading. By the way, this is harking back to what happened at the edge of the Red Sea. If you read Exodus 14, this is fascinating. By the way, were the waters of the Red Sea a menace to God's people while they were united? While they were together? They were a menace. There was no escape. What needed to happen to the waters for God's people to have an escape, to prepare a way for them to escape? The waters had to be, by the way, two words are used in Exodus 14. The waters had to be dried up and also the word divided. In other words, they were going to fight against one another. And so as long as the waters were united and not divided, God's people were in danger. And now the Egyptians, these are the waters that are coming. The Egyptians come with all their 600 chariots and armies. They're going to recover those that escaped from Egypt. And then you can read in Exodus 14, the pillar of fire interposes between the army of the Egyptians and God's people. And listen carefully. And on the side of the Egyptians, there's darkness. But on the side of God's people, glorious light. Let me read this before I end the story. This is typology. Notice it says, she's talked about darkness. She's talked about the waters flowing. She's talked about the waters arrested. And now she says, with fearful forebodings, they, that is the wicked, gaze upon the symbol of God's covenant and long to be shielded from its overpowering darkness. And right before, she says, then a rainbow shining with the glory from the throne of God spans the heavens and seems to encircle each praying company. God's people in light, the wicked in darkness. Then the waters dry up and prepare the way for the escape of God's people. And then what happens with the waters? Instead of avalanching themselves upon God's people, they avalanche upon their enemies. And now notice this. What do God's people sing after they've crossed the Red Sea? The Song of Moses. What will God's people who are delivered sing after they cross the Red Sea symbolically? The Song of Moses and the Lamb. So there must be some connection between what happened then and what happened later. Are you with me? It's exciting when you study the Bible in this way. Let's finish reading this statement from Ellen White. It is at midnight that God manifests His power for the deliverance of His people. In the midst of the angry heavens, in one clear space of indescribable glory, whence comes the voice of God like the sound of many waters, it is done. The very words that describe the seventh plague. So do we have the last three plagues clearly expressed in this passage from Ellen White? Yes, we have the darkness, we have the waters flowing, we have the waters dried up, God's people in light, the wicked in darkness, and then God says it is done, and then you have plague number 7. Ellen White doesn't use the language of Revelation, but it is as subtle as a tornado. That's what she is describing. Now, we have 7 minutes left. Let's begin with the perspective of Daniel 11, verse 40 through verse 45. Although Daniel 11, 40 to 45, falls outside the immediate scope of our present study because we're studying Revelation, we're studying Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Revelation 12, 13, and 17, so we haven't dealt really with Daniel 11. I would still want to make some comments, a few remarks about Daniel 11, 40 to 45, because it runs parallel. Daniel 11, 40 through 45 is closely related to the present study, but space won't allow us to do it in detail. We're going to do that in the last 2 presentations. Now let's go to Daniel 11, verse 30, through Daniel 11, verse 45. 4 stages. We're going to go back to verse 30 because we have to have a little bit of context. Just like Revelation 17 has context. It takes you back. Daniel 11, 31 to 39 describes the king of the north. By the way, it's the clay. The king of the north is the clay of Daniel 2. It's the little horn of Daniel 7. It's the dragon of Revelation 12. It's the sea beast of Revelation chapter 13. It's the man of sin of 2 Thessalonians 2. It's the harlot of Revelation chapter 17. And it is the Antichrist of 1 John. All those represent the same system. Now, in Daniel 11, 31 to 39, we find a description of the king of the north persecuting those who know their God and those of understanding. Would that be the righteous? Those who know their God and people of understanding? Of course. That's verses 32 to 35. Now, the interesting detail is that it says that Daniel 11:31-39 describes the king of the north persecuting those who know their God and those of understanding for how long? It doesn't say for 1260 days, it says for days. I sustain that there we need to include 1260 days, even though it's not in the text. And you're going to see the reason why as we examine all of the stages here in Daniel 11. And by the way, when we get together again, I will give you another example in the Bible where in one passage it says days, and in the other passage it speaks of years, even though the word days doesn't have the qualifier, a numeral qualifier. In fact, let's go to that now. Let's go to the book of Isaiah, chapter 24. And we'll do this quickly because we only have 4 minutes left. We find Isaiah. Where did I say in Isaiah? 20 what? 24. Very good. Isaiah 24. And we're going to read verse 19. This is the second coming. The earth is utterly broken down. The earth is clean dissolved. The earth is moved exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall be removed like a cottage, and the transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. So it's describing the second coming. And then notice what it says. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall punish the host of the high ones. That's the angels. I have an entire study of this. Shall punish the host of the high ones that are on high. And there's another group, an earthly group. And the kings of the earth upon the earth. What is their punishment going to be? Verse 22. And they shall be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit. Where is Satan? Where are the wicked gathered during the millennium? In the abyss, in the pit. And shall be shut up in the what? Prison. The very word that's used in Revelation chapter 20. And after many days, they will be punished. It says visited in the King James, but really it's the same word, shall be punished. So, how long are they going to remain in the pit? Days. Many days. How does Revelation interpret the many days? How many are the many days? 1,000 years. So one passage says days, many days, but Revelation tells us many days are 1,000 years. Are you following me or not? So we should not really be worried about the fact that it says here that those who know their God and those who are of understanding are going to be persecuted for days. It's 1,260 days, according to the previous prophecies. And by the way, we find also in verse 33 clearly that this is the same period of papal dominion, because in verse 33 it says that during this period many of the faithful fell by sword and flame, by captivity, and by plundering. Those who knew their God and those of understanding were persecuted. And what did they go through? They were persecuted by sword and flame, by captivity, and by plundering. These are the very methods the papacy used in an attempt to snuff out dissent. You can read it in history. So the days are really 1,260 days in the context of the previous outlines. Now, our time is up. And so we will pick up in the next session where we left off with the additional stages that are found here in Daniel chapter 11. Daniel 11 follows the same sequence that we find in the previous prophecies in Daniel 7, Revelation chapter 12, and Revelation chapter 13. So, did you understand what we looked at this morning? Yes? Praise the Lord. That's great. Can we trust that the spirit of prophecy is in harmony with the Bible? Amen. Absolutely. So don't miss the next exciting episode.